Welcome to the Hiring and Empowering Solutions podcast. This podcast is dedicated to providing the key ingredients to transform your employees into a dream team, creating consistent results in every aspect of your business, including your people, your process, and your profits. Your team empowerment, leadership, business development, communication, hiring, and firing. As some of the country's leading staffing and management consultants, we help business owners, i.e. entrepreneurs, and the team that support them, what we call intrapreneurs, to powerfully connect and work together to grow the business. Okie dokie. So we're back and we have an amazing conversation today. I am so excited about our guest today. We have Tom Hannon here, and we are going to be speaking about when is the time to begin working on your law firm exit strategy. So often I will speak with attorneys, especially if they've been, honestly, even if they're a newbie, it's so really, really cool to have some newer attorneys that already, when they hang their shingle, are thinking about this. They're starting to build their business and start thinking of their law firm as a business. And then, as you all know, I do law firm placement. And when I have people adding to their team, saying and hiring associates, et cetera, the partnership track carrot's not dangled so much anymore. And honestly, candidates aren't looking for that. They have more of a long-term strategy mindset. And the conversation that I hear and the questions that I get during the interviewing process and trying to get associates to look at your law firm jobs, to look to become a member of your team, the question I get so often is, hey, is there any opportunity for succession planning? Is there any opportunity for down the road for me to eventually be able to own this thing? And, you know, through the beautiful world of social media and LinkedIn, I had the amazing opportunity to connect with Tom Hannon from business. He's a business development specialist. And, you know, Tom, I want you to just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your backstory.
Oh, hey, Molly, it's great to be on your show. I've been very impressed with all the podcasts I've listened to and our conversations that we had before this. For me personally, I am a business development specialist, but I've spent 30 years as a serial entrepreneur. I've started and sold 12 businesses.
Wow.
And I sold almost the same exact business in 3 different decades.
Oh, wow.
So I realized that I love being an entrepreneur, but what I loved the most was creating something to sell. And I was infatuated with that process more than anything else throughout my career.
Oh my God. Wow. So talk to us a little bit, and I know we're going to dive deep into the strategy, the conversation, and get people really starting to wrap their arms around when the time is to begin working on your law firm exit strategy. When is the time to start thinking about when to and how to sell a law practice? This is a question that has been lingering for attorneys by and large, and entrepreneurs, I'm sure you're going to speak into, that really kind of get stuck on this conversation, but there's no information out there. And I know before we started recording, you did your due diligence and really spent some time digging into how to sell a law practice, because you focus on businesses across the industry board. Talk to us a little bit about, how do you even get into that mindset of even shifting from that you are a business owner to really thinking of that entrepreneurial spirit and start thinking about begin with the end in mind and how to sell a practice?
Yeah, I think that what you just said at the end there is what you need to do. It's the Stephen Covey 7 habits, right? You need to begin with the end in mind. So when you start your business, no one's ever thinking about they're going to sell it. They're always they start a business and they get very passionate about what they're good at, and they focus on all those items that they're really good at, and then they start building a business surrounded by by those, characteristics of themselves. And that's fine. And you can start a business that way, and you can actually have a successful business that way. But that mentality will never lead to an exit. That's why 80% of businesses never sell, because the entrepreneur or the person who started it is not thinking about the buyer. They're just thinking about themselves. So, when you start a business, you need to think about putting all the pieces in place so that it can be transferred. And you may not transfer it for 30 years or 20 years or 10 years. But if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to exit. And I can tell you from personal experience, you never know when the exit's going to come. You just don't know when someone's going to approach you. You don't know when you're going to have a health issue. You don't know when you're going to have a geographic issue. Things happen in life, and your business needs to be, you need to be ready to part with your business very quickly sometimes. And that's the mistake that the majority of entrepreneurs make. They don't prepare for it. They don't think it's going to happen, and they think it's like a house that they're going to put it up for sale and someone's just going to come and buy it. And it's certainly not the way that it works.
Wow. I love what you just said about you never know, talking about some life circumstances that happen in regards to health crisis, or whether it be with you or an aging parent or a child or what have you. I've had people that had a sudden death of a child. They've had sudden death of a parent. And so often I'll get these phone calls where people will say to me, hey, do you have any positions? Because I'm going to close up shop. I'm going to close up my law firm for this very, very point. I'm completely, honestly, just overwhelmed. I am riddled with anxiety, grief, whatever the situation is at hand. And I didn't do this thing right. There's nothing to sell. So for me, I'm just going to shut it. And there might be something for sale, but just the process of even trying to get their arms around it when they're in immense crisis, as their only solution is just shut the thing down and go get a job.
Yeah. And that's really unfortunate. I mean, I can give you a very distinct personal experience that 5 years ago, I was a triathlete, and I was competing for Ironman, and I was in the best shape of my life. And out of nowhere, I suffered an artery dissection, and I could no longer run my business. And I certainly couldn't do Ironman anymore. And I was able to sell my business to a competitor at a very high valuation rate inside of 3 months. And I was able to do that because the business could be transferred at any moment. We set it up that way from day one. And even though I had no intention of selling it, I was planning on running it the rest of my life. And that just, and everything shifted really in an instant. So that can happen to any of us. You can have, like you said, it can be a family member, it can be a child, a parent, or it can be a spouse or yourself. You need to be ready for these things. If you're not, you're going to all that hard work. You're not going to get compensated. You're not going to get an exit, and that's really unfortunate. And it happens a lot.
Wow. Oh my goodness. You just said something that really I want to highlight here, because, we always hear none of us are promised tomorrow. We always hear that all the time, but I think this is not to breathe fear into the room, but this is an extraordinary invitation for our listeners today to start interacting with your life every single day when you wake up tomorrow, and start interacting with your business, that you're preparing for the worst case scenario, number one, which is a beautiful accountability to really start interacting with this. I love that you mentioned Covey. And when you said that, I'm like, oh yes, you and I had a great long conversation about Covey a couple of weeks ago. And I just wrote it down again because you reminded me. I'm going back and listening to the 7 Habits and starting all over with beginner's mind on that one, because it's so very true.
Yeah, Covey's book, and I think I was one of the first people to buy it. Was it was just eye opening in so many different ways, and I think it was, when you and I talked, it was so fantastic to kind of relive that book. Um, and I'm listening to it as well, and something that I think about a lot is staying out of that fourth quadrant. So you're staying out of stress. So when you think about selling your business, it's the same thing. You need to stay out of that stress moment. And if you're prepared, like Covey talks about, planting the seeds in March and April so that you can have a great harvest in October and September, those are the things that you need. It's the same exact thing when you think about a business. Um, a lot of people just don't think that way. And that's the unfortunate thing. And I also agree with you. You really need to embrace life as it's going. Because a lot of people don't do that either. They think there's going to be a someday, and they may know, and you're not promised tomorrow. We find that out the hard way when something happens to either us or somebody close to us, and it's not to put fear into the room, as you said, but it's just to think about things with a more clear perspective that way.
It's interesting because for our listeners who are youngins who are like, who's Stephen Covey and what book are you talking about here? The title is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We'll go ahead and put that link in the show notes as well. Highly, highly, highly recommend that you absolutely spend some time and go back to that book. And if you're old bee like I am, like Tom, go back and listen to it, but with a fresh set of eyes with this conversation, because chances are when you listen to it, you're just hanging your shingle, or maybe you're making the decision to really begin to implement processes. You're making the decision to really operate and have clarity and awareness around the 4 quadrants and some of the most revolutionary strategies that he shares in that book. But you made a great point of, if you all think, well, it's never going to happen to me. I have a husband and wife team here that are clients. I've known them for like 20 years, 25 years, both attorneys, both owned the business, and the husband had very, very unexpectedly died. And the wife still had the practice. It was both their names on the practice. And she had, small children, and could not even deal with the grief and be there for her kids and everything, because she had to keep the practice running to put food on the table. And I remember her saying to me multiple times, I wish I could just close this thing up and sell it. And then I can go ahead, spend my time grieving, spend my time with my kids, be able to not worry about the finances of that. And then when I can catch my breath, make a decision about what my next right move is.
Yeah, and that's the situation people get themselves in. So when you think about circling this conversation back to Covey, right? Begin with the end in mind. So when you think about when you start your business, right? The very first thing that you need to think about beyond building the business is, how will I eventually exit the business? And you need to start thinking about that in terms of, how are you going to build this business? And I'll give you a few examples of what really, worked for me when I was doing this. And first of all, is I got to know myself really good. So I took personality tests, I took assessments, and I took those assessments so I could understand what I was very good at. And then I wanted to hire people that did things that I didn't do well, so that I could have a system in place for the business itself, so that I could cover all the aspects. And the second thing I did was I understood who bought these businesses. So if you have a law firm, what company buys, what law firms buy other law firms? Is it, George Washington law firm? Is it John Quincy Adams law firm? Whatever it is, they all have a similarity. There's something they're all looking for when they buy a firm. So you need to understand what that is, and you need to build your firm so that it can be acquired based on how they acquire other businesses. And that's something to think about when you're first starting out. Nobody wants a jack of all trades. So, you find something that you're really good at, you have a niche, you specialize in it, and then you look how how other companies acquire you, and you build towards that. So God forbid, if you're not here anymore and your wife is left, or your husband's left, or your partner, somebody's left with this business that they can actually, exit that business, sell it to somebody else, and not just close the doors without getting any value for it.
Hey, you just said something that I just love. You said it twice about who you sold your business to, right? Your competition. When you had your health scare and things of that nature. Listeners, listen up. This is easy peasy here. If you even just focus on your competition and people that are in your marketplace, that for you to shift your mind from, because people are always talking about my competition, like it's a bad thing. And I have a law firm actually two of them in Georgia that both of them just went through selling practice, two different areas of law to their competition for people in their backyard. And right now, one of them selling, one of them's buying a firm. And on paper, they would look like their competition, but that's low hanging fruit there, right?
Well, right. So competition is good. Right. That's somebody who could acquire your business. So what you want to do is you want to bring them closer, and they always say that statement about bringing it, you keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Closer. Yeah.
Right. So how do you do that? You sign up for their newsletter. You make sure you're friends with all those people on LinkedIn. Follow what they're doing. Set up some, Google News alerts for those companies so that, this is like business development stuff, right? You go through these things and you make sure you know what's going on with your competition, so that it can really help you if they're going to be the person to acquire your business. The more you know about them, the better the better your chances are of actually making that happen. And if you find out that they've acquired somebody else, because you always will. I mean, it's a small field. It's a small enough industry where you're going to find out that happened. Mm-hmm. You can really, that's when you say, okay, they're open for this. And then you're starting to pay attention. And then you're looking for cues, looking for things that they did. And if you know that they acquired somebody, take the person out for dinner or lunch or breakfast or whatever that they acquired, and find out as much as you can about that acquisition, so that you can be at least prepared for it if you decide to go down that road.
I even go a step further and recommend to my clients that you go and have a synergy meeting when you find out who your competition is. And again, be really clear on who your competition is. If you're a small, solo, medium-sized firm, what have you, your competition isn't necessarily the 500 lawyer firm, what have you. But people that are and I like to shift the word competition to your colleagues or to your peers and things of that nature. Be really courageous and brave and go have a synergy meeting with them. Go hear about their practice and befriend them. And that has worked out so well, because I always use this for estate planning. So all estate planning all estate planning practices are not created equal. You go out and you break bread and have lunch with your 3, 5, 10 colleagues or what have you, or pick 2 or 3 of them and sit down with them and say, tell me a little bit about your practice. I know we're both in estate planning. They might do estate litigation and you don't. And you could be referral sources. You might do Medicaid and they don't, or elder law planning. There are so many different moving pieces. And again, people don't have the best websites. They maybe don't have all the SEO search terms on their website. And when you break bread, so often when you do that, you both might be estate planning attorneys, but they do conservatorships and guardianships or guardian ad litem, and you don't, or special needs planning or settlement planning. There are so many moving pieces and parts where don't go into a place of scarcity mindset, and go into a place of talking about and then asking them question like, okay, you've been doing this thing for 10, 12, 20 years, whatever it might be. What's your exit strategy? What are you thinking of? And then lo and behold, you become colleagues.
Absolutely. So many people are afraid of having those conversations with, and I know you want to use the term colleague instead of a competitor, but, if you think about it, you're in a competitive field, but on the other side of it is you want to be able to meet with these people, because at the end of the day, people do business with who they know, like, and trust. And if you have people that you've met along the way that you feel that way about, even if you're in competition for clients for them, or maybe, like you said, you become a good referral source for them, you've created a relationship. And when it comes time to move on, then it's going to be easier for you to start that conversation out, because you already have some type of relationship with that person. And it's going to greatly benefit the transaction. It will make it easier, less stressful, and maybe there could be less negotiation versus coming in cold, where they don't know you, they don't trust you, they don't know if your numbers are real, they don't know if the client's going to transfer well. I mean, that's the other thing to think about too, is like what your clientele is versus the other people's clientele, is how easily those the clients are transferred. That would be a big piece of that too. But yeah, by all means, friend them on LinkedIn, send them a message, have a Zoom meeting, have a coffee, have a dinner, play around a golf, whatever it is. You can really create a relationship fairly quickly in that instance.
Mm-hmm. And it really will support you in regards to figuring out your exit strategy. I know you did a lot of amazing research prior to recording today on how to sell a law practice, how to sell a law firm. Tell us a little bit about the findings or lack thereof that you have come up with, because I hear this all the time from attorneys. There's no information out there. You go to the American Bar Association, or maybe you belong to some organizations and somebody does a breakout session at these legal conferences of what have you, of how they sold their law firm and what have you. But honestly, they were just throwing darts into the air, or they just came up with a model that my experience is that there's no framework out there that is rock solid on how to do this. That's coming from a business owner, from an entrepreneurial, from a profitability perspective. Talk to us a little bit about what you found during your research on this conversation.
Yeah, it was very interesting because, I come from a background of more Main Street businesses. And when you sell a Main Street business, your challenge is, how do you value them? And then how do you actually go about selling the business and finding the buyers? It's those same trends. So I did this research, and it was pretty good. It was by a fellow named Lou Nostro. And, I just want to put it out there, for everybody listening, I am certainly not a lawyer. I'm not an expert at this. I'm not an expert at selling a law practice, but I did do this research, and it was very interesting. So he talked about the laws. There's rules about it, and it's on a website with the ACTEC. And he talks about some of the rules. They calls it Model Rule 1.17, about how these law firms are actually how the transactions take place, which is something that that if you want to sell, you should look into. But they talk about the same general things as on the value. Do you get a set fee, or do you do what's called an earnout? And if somebody hasn't heard of an earnout before, an earnout is you're paid based on the amount of clients that stay, or you're based on the revenue that's generated. And he does recommend 4 different people. One of them is James Cotterman, who does valuations for law firms. I would recommend to anyone who's going to sell is to try to get as much cash as you can at closing. Because when you do an earnout, anything can happen. Your clients may not like the new attorneys. They might not like their rules. They might not fit into their system, and they leave. And then you're left with not getting what you wanted to get from the transaction. So you want to try and get as much as you can up front. Although I get that would be hard because you don't know exactly how much everyone's going to spend each year. But he lists four people: James Cotterman, John Olmsted, Ed Paul, Roy Ginsburg, and Tom Lefnisky. I think I said his last name correctly, but
I'll put all the names in the show notes. Thank you for that. I'll put them all in there in the show notes for our listeners who are like, wait, spell that for me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I looked at them, and I mean, they have some good information that I would recommend them to check out. But they talk, their biggest thing is when you talked about this is who is going to buy the business. And they said that's the one question they can't answer. And you talked about some methods that people use. They advertise in a local bar magazine, some of the business publications. Some people engage with a business broker. I could talk to you about business brokers for the next 3 hours if you, but I wouldn't recommend going that route. But not unless they specialize in selling this type of business. But yeah, it was an interesting podcast too. I would recommend, listening to it and as well to really educate yourself. Because I don't think that there's a lot of information out there for attorneys and how to actually transfer their businesses.
There is not. And I love what you said too, of get as much cash up front and start, when you begin to think about when is the time to begin to think about it. And I love what you said, like just even go from a place of urgency. Listen, urgency and deadlines are the best accountability in the world. It's just that 2 millimeter shift that I always talk about, that Tony Robbins always talks about in your mindset. You behave differently, you think differently, you communicate differently, the way that you systematize and process your business and build it. I've had many, it was back in the late 90s or whatever. And I think this by and large. I work in estate planning and elder law when they started talking about for the states that this was legal for you to take your name off the door and change it to like the estate planning law center or the wealth planning, what have you. So it's not always about quote unquote, the guy, and making it to start shifting into that mindset of even the law firms that did that. I remember seeing it was the late 90s, early 2000, and the firms that actually did that and got their ego out of the way and started making about Bob Smith, the attorney, and making it about a center, so to speak, and finding some client-centered words to put into the naming conventions of their law firm. I mean, those were the firms that just soared, started 5Xing, 10Xing their practice because their mindset and their intentionality was about, I own a business and I happen to be a lawyer versus I own a law firm.
But absolutely. If you can take yourself out of the equation, like you were saying, you're not Bob Smith, the attorney. You are, whatever it is. I just, XYZ, elder law, estate planning, and you name it a business name versus a personal name. And you take yourself out of that equation. You create systems that work. You can change your entire business if you do that. And being customized, and every client is different. That type of mentality, you're just trading hours for dollars. You're not going to build an actual business. You're going to build a nice little practice for yourself. You're going to make some money, but that type of a business is not transferable. We just went through the estate planning process, my wife and I, and we're each other's second marriage, and we have kids from different marriages, and it was super complicated. But the company that we had, even though it was a smaller company, they had a system in place, and we had interviewed a dozen attorneys before we ended up going with them, and it was his systems that he used and the recommendations and so forth that really swayed us to end up using them to do our estate planning. So, but I fully agree with you. I think that's the way the people that grow their businesses are the people who think the business is a business, not you're just practicing loss as yourself.
Yeah. So our listeners, all right, they're like, Tom, I'm bought in. I get it. I'm going to really start looking at the scene, beginning with the end in mind, going to get the book, going to start studying Covey. Now what? Now tell me a little bit about you begin with the end in mind. What are some things, what are some drive-by nuggets you could leave for our listeners today of what other things should they be considering and looking at to start beginning? I don't care if it's exit strategies in 10 years or 2 years or what have you, but interacting with it interacting with it like it's happening in 2 years. And this is the example I always tell people. I do hiring all the time, and they'll say to me, well, how do I know this person's not going to leave in 2 years? And I invest all this time in training and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you don't. There's no guarantee. So here's the really cool thing about it. Every person that you hire, everything that you begin to implement in your practice, just assume you only have 24 months with this person. So now the accountability is back on you to make certain that you're getting everything they do systematized, making certain like their expiration dates in 24 months. And you know that going in. So how are you going to get the most out of it? How is it going to make your business, your practice better than when they came there? And then when they do leave, the whole thing doesn't crumble. In fact, it's even better, and nobody's delegating back up to you. And the firms that adopt this idea and really shift into that have just expanded wildly versus this whole, forever mindset that I got forever to do this thing, or I have forever to get the most out of it. This person's going to be here. It's all or nothing thinking. So what would you say for people to start interacting with this, like the clock is ticking?
Sure. And I think what you give, the advice you give them about employees in 2021 is absolutely accurate. Nobody is going to be at your firm for 30 years. Those days are over. You might get an occasional one, but it's very rare. So, just thinking in that mindset of like, you got like a 2-year window here, right? What do you need to do in this 2-year window so that you could shift from where you are to where your business is sellable? You can do it quicker than 2 years, but you could probably do it in 12 to 18 months. And the first thing is, everything should be in a system. You should not have anything that is have as very little unique things as possible. Your business should be as systemized as possible. It should be systemized with finances. It should be systemized with the way that you treat employees, the way that your pay structure works, the way that your billing works. It should all be a system. You should have all your information should be easy to access, whether it's on QuickBooks or whatever the hottest new trend in accounting software is. It should all be there. You should have some type of a CRM. And if you don't know what that is, that's a contact management software where you can keep all your clients' information. You can keep all their phone numbers, their emails, what you've done for them. You can keep all the different projects that you've done for them. I would do that. And I'll tell you one thing, because your audience is attorneys, anyone who's involved in business transactions, I would pay attention to them. I would pay attention to the way that they go and the ones that go smooth versus the ones that go bad, and analyze that and say, okay, what am I doing in my business so they can be transferable based on what you're seeing? The ones that sell easy, is my business a replica of this, or is it more the replica of the ones that are almost impossible to get over the finish line? And start thinking about your business that way, because those are important pieces that you can get a lot of information from seeing how those deals go down.
Oh, I love that. And people always talk about process and systems and process. I mean, we have Michael Gerber to thank for that with the email way back when, which I'm wholehearted in favor of. But I like, and keep me honest here. I think this shift that you have, I wrote down, first you said accounting, then you said CRM. And the third thing that you said, right, of doing that analysis of every client, in addition to PNCs, prospects, leads, prospective new client, whatever terminology resonates for you, and doing in your weekly team meeting, do an analysis of that. Which ones hired us and went swimmingly? Why did they hire us? Let's look. Did you use the initial contact focuser? Did you use this? Did they get the confirmation letter? Did they get the automation? Did they get, and just don't turn it into a massive project. Just real quick, get deeply curious and ask the questions. Okay, we had 5 new prospects that came into the process this week. And out of these 5, 4 of them didn't hire us, or they wouldn't even book an initial consultation. Okay, time out. Whoa. What happened? Oh, we started outsourcing to a, third-party reception services or whatever they call them, phone service. We're like, oh, okay, now we know that doesn't work. Part of our process is that we have a live human being and we have a dedicated client service coordinator. There are clues and information every single where in your practice of where the breakdown. It's not that so often people will be like, oh, it's a bunch of crappy leads. We have unqualified leads. I'm like, no, that's not true. There's something happened because your conversion rates just plummeted.
Absolutely. And you need to be really focused on this, is on your systems. What systems work? Are you converting your leads? Are you converting your clients? What's happening? Are you converting certain people converting at a higher rate than others? What are they doing differently? And stay focused on that, because anyone who's coming in to look at your practice or is going to acquire your practice, the one thing, they're buying the future. Whatever you did in the past is the past. You're trying to get value on what you did in the past, but they're looking, to buy the future. So if you can say to somebody, hey, look, here's my sales system for closing clients. This is what we do. We buy leads, or we get leads from XYZ, or we get referrals. Here are all my referral sources. Here's how I treat them financially, whatever your deal is with them. But you have a system, and I'm closing 60% of people that call me. And they might be talking to an attorney, like all of a sudden scratching their head, like, I'm only closing 25%. If I buy this company, I can have this system, then they get excited about it. And that's something that as a business owner, be super focused on that, because that's what people are looking at. And they're also going to be looking at your finances, which would be a big part of it. And, make sure you want to be lean, but you also don't want to be too lean. Mm-hmm. Someone doesn't want to think that they have to, put in systems that you don't have because you were, you were being a little bit too conservative. So there's a balance there.
Yeah. You said something really critical there. I love what you said, because the firms that I manage, every Monday, I get all my reporting from them, right? And I make them be very pristine with conversion rates. So you have 3 associate attorneys, or maybe you have a paralegal that's doing some of the meetings or what have you. Everybody has a conversion rate, and I am like a lunatic around the conversion rates. Have to be consistent across the board. They can't be dependent on the guy or gal in the conference room, because so often people and attorneys, if you're doing all of your meetings and you're afraid to give up your meetings and delegate it to an associate or to a paralegal or what have you, because you're like, no, my clients really want to see me. That's what I hear all the time. Or our conversion rates are going to go in the toilet if they don't get, the guru, so to speak. This is an invitation for you to start thinking about when you sell your practice, because that can't scale and that can't sustain. And it's not a business model. Yes, they're going to plummet a bit in the beginning, but that that's an invitation for you to start looking at your process for intake, your process for closing, your process for the life cycle of a file in your production, and then your process for profitability. And each week when I see the conversion rates, when I start looking with the firm, always the main person whose name's on the door is, 85% or higher, what have you, because they're the brain surgeon. But then you got a couple associates, and the associates might be in the 20% or 30% or 50% or what have you. I'm like, this is amazing. This is good news, because how do we clone you? How do we duplicate what you're doing? Because it's not that you're smarter than anyone else in the building. It's not that you're better anywhere in the building, but you're just, my experience, your confidence is there. And so how do we clone confidence?
Yeah. And you clone it through a process.
Yep.
You do it through, you put, as somebody who is an attorney, I mean, you hate to say they're a salesperson, but they are, right? You're meeting new clients all the time, and they have to feel confident that you're going to, be a good attorney for them, be a good representative. But it's a sales process. It's like anything, Sandler sales training. Put your people through some type of process training that they can all be doing the same thing that works.
Oh, Sandler's the best.
Oh yeah. The pain funnel and the whole, everything about Sandler is good. It's good for hard sale. I don't feel like it's a relationship sale, but it's definitely a hard sale.
Yeah. And yeah. So I could put that in the show notes as well. I love this. And, again, start with the hard part. So often people will focus, they're like, okay, great, I'm going to work on my process and system. Let me work on, and it's a comfort zone, right? Because it's not fun, and it is exhausting, and it's scary and overwhelming to start with accounting, to start with CRM, to start with knowing your numbers, your conversion rates, and doing analysis of every single prospective client and existing client that comes through the process. But guess what? You're business owners. You can do hard things. We can do hard things right now. And so often I'll have people say, okay, well, let's look at the process for how we process mail. Don't take that from here that we're talking about process is very general. What I'm hearing from you, Tom, today is start with the big ones. Start with accounting, start with CRM, and start with the analysis of everything from a prospect to the closing of a file for an existing client.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key, that is the key throughout this is, you look at 10,000 feet, then 5,000 feet, and then you can work your way down. But again, think about it through your own dealings. You've seen business deals, you've seen the ones that get blown up in due diligence. Your situation is going to be no different. So by looking at those processes and understanding how they work and having a good understanding of them and making them, making everything flow smoothly is really the key when you're building a business. Because as you said, like the ebook, he talks about all these things. If you have never read the E-Myth, yeah, you read it because it will change your mindset 100% from becoming a technician to a business owner. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't do well. They don't think their way through that part of it. But but go through those systems and you can create a business that somebody's going to want to buy for sure.
Yeah. I mean, how many businesses have you sold?
I sold 12. I've had multiple 7-figure exits. I've had a bunch of exits that were nice. And I was able to actually retire from the first time when I was 35.
Wow.
I know I started my first business at 20 and I bought out my biggest competitor at 21. And then I rolled up several other businesses and sold them to an international company when I was 26. And,
bravo.
Yeah. And then I ended up working for them afterwards, which was very interesting. And they taught me so much because they were a UK-based company, and they spent 2 years training me. And then they sold their business. And when they sold, my non-compete was up, and I didn't want to work for the company that acquired them. So I went back out on my own. and I created a much bigger business than I ever dreamed I could because of the training they gave me.
What a beautiful scenario. So often, so I hear that from entrepreneurs and attorneys. What a beautiful situation to be able to sell your business, then come on as a consultant, what have you. And to your point, where you get to always, how can I become a lifetime learner? What can I do with this and duplicate it and then rise above? And because sometimes you just said something I really want to highlight. Selling your business and an exit strategy does not mean retirement. And so often people think that the time you think about that is when you're exhausted, burned out, and you want running from versus running to. And the time to think about that is when you're going to retire. I love what you just said. Maybe we need to do a whole nother show on that. But so often when I'm like, what's your exit strategy? When I start talking with people, the immediate knee-jerk response is, well, I'm never going to retire. I'm like, what does an exit strategy and selling a business have to do with retirement?
Right. You can sell your business in, let's say, Seattle, Washington, right? And maybe you want to move to Boston, or maybe you want to move to Florida or Texas, or maybe you want to move to Australia, who knows? But you could build something and you could sell it, and be at a fairly young age. And then transition to a different area. Maybe you're going to want to transfer to a different field for a little while. But selling a business isn't retirement. I mean, I sold a business, and then I built wiffle ball fields, and I wrote a book, and I did some business brokering, and I invested. I became a little bit of a philanthropist for a while, and I went out and I had some fun for 3 to 4 years, and then I went back into, working full time. And you can do that if you set it up right. Retirement doesn't mean you're over. Maybe you do it at 60. It doesn't mean it's over. Then you can keep going, and you can have a lot of fun and have an exit for your hard work at the same time.
Some of my favorite clients right now are in their late 30s to mid 40s right now, working on this process of exit strategy, selling their practice. And attorneys are probably like, oh, you can't sell a practice in Washington and go hang one up in Boston. That's not what we're saying. But their next phase, their next chapter is being a consultant or mentoring and having a coaching business for other small startup attorneys and supporting them with exactly this conversation. So don't be so linear of thinking that the only thing you can do is practice law. Some of you are ready to get into the coaching environment, coaching other baby attorneys, being a consultant, being of counsel, whatever that might mean for you.
Right. And there's a lot of companies out there too that are looking for somebody who has that experience, and they might bring you on, like you said, as a consultant. The company that did my estate planning, and they actually came from an insurance background. And they were somebody else, and then they had this other business, and they sold that business, and then they went into the estate planning business. So wow. You can do more than one thing. Just because you went to school and you specialize in something, and now you're 28 years old and you're going to do this for the next 30 years, maybe not. Maybe you do it for 10, 5, and then build the right thing, sell it, and you never know what the next opportunity is going to be. I mean, maybe you get an opportunity to work for a really large corporation as an in-house counsel and then they exit, and then you can get stock. And I mean, there's just so many different things that can happen in your life if you think about it from a much higher level than thinking about it small.
Yeah, an entrepreneurial business perspective versus an attorney perspective. I love. Wow. So Tom, we could talk all day about this. Thank you for your wisdom, for your expertise, for your time today. I know our listeners, they're like, wait, why shouldn't I go with a broker? Tom said he could talk about it for 3 hours. How do people get a hold of you? And our listeners, I'm sure, would love. I'll put the links in for the podcast that you spoke about, the names that you spoke about, Covey's book. I'll put all the goodies that we discussed today in our show notes. but how can our listeners get a hold of you? And would you be willing to hop on a call if some of our attorneys are ready to bite the bullet?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to talk to anyone. I always say I've got 20 minutes for anybody that wants to talk. So anyone who wants to reach me, they could do it through LinkedIn. That would be the absolute best. And my LinkedIn handle is my name, because I got in a long time ago. I think I was one of the original people at LinkedIn.
Yeah, you're a junior there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Thomas P. Hannon Jr. I still get the junior going around, even though my dad's not been with us for a long time. But that's the best way to reach me. And if you that would be the best way.
Great. I'll put that in the show note links as well. Wow, what a great conversation today. I could talk about this for days and days and days on, and greatly appreciate your time today. I'm going to put everything in the show notes. And I think we might have to have you back on to talk about this whole concept around why not to use a broker. I'm intrigued.
Oh, yeah. I could talk all day about business brokers, but yeah, I'd love to talk about that sometime for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for being our guest today. And we are going to bring you back for certain.
Thanks, Molly. Have a great rest of the day.
Okay. Until next time, this has been an episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. You can check us out at hiringandempowering.com.